Hello everybody. I would like to draw your attention to another very important revolution which inspired people all over the world, not only in the century that happened, but even today. And we are talking about the Great French Revolution. Okay, so French Revolution was a revolution which inspired people all over the world to revolt, to rebel against feudalism and conservatism. So it was called the mother of all revolutions. So that is my first slide, how it was called the mother of all revolutions. So we are in fact here discussing the period around 1789 to 1815, the time when the revolution happened. And after the revolution, how there was the rule by Napoleon, who wanted to create an empire of his own. So you can see how the age of democratic revolutions came to a head these years, 1789 and the years close to that. So we can see how it happened in France, which was one of the most advanced nations of that is the 18th century, and it created an atmosphere of hope and confidence, that the hope that people could revolt against the rulers who were not able to give them a proper governance. So yet another view about this revolution is that it was a world revolution. So it can be considered as one of the greatest social and political upheavals of the century, which created its repercussions not only in social scenario but in the political and economic scenario as well. So you can very easily analyze and understand that it was a revolution which put an end to the age-old feudal order of France. Okay, before we discuss about the revolution, I would like to draw your attention to a few debates, a few theories regarding the nature of the revolution. Prominent theory about the revolution is that it was a capitalist revolution. That is the orthodox Marxist theory. They believe that it was not a political change, but at the same time, it was a revolution which had its repercussions in the social and economic scenario as well. So they try to say that socially it was a bourgeois revolution. Economically, it was a capitalist revolution when the common people made an attempt to overthrow feudalism and to establish capitalism. In the Marxian terms, you can call it as a class struggle which put an end to the rule by the nobles, that is, which tried to curb the control of the nobles. And at the same time, you could see how this revolution paved way for the bourgeois to take over France. Now, there was a revisionist approach from a few scholars that included Alfred Corbin and Francois Furet. Okay, the revisionist approach, in this slide you can see that they were against the Marxist interpretation. Okay, they said that it cannot be treated as a capitalist revolution because predominantly the people who revolted belonged to the ordinary classes, and their conclusion was that it was a social revolution. Okay, it was not a revolution which involved class struggle where the nobility was replaced by the bourgeoisie. That was a view which the Marxist thinkers had brought about. So this was a revisionist approach to it by Alfred Corbin and Francois Furet. Okay, so here in this slide, I've given you the names of Alfred Corbin and Francois Furet. Okay, now next is about the feminist approach. A lot of historians actually, especially gender historians, tried to speak about the participation of women in this particular revolution, how women had participated in a large scale, and also how their role actually got ignored and marginalized. So they try to assert the fact that the participation of women in fact changed the nature and character of the revolution. Okay, so just a few theories about the revolution. One, the old Marxian approach. Second one, the revisionist approach. And the third one, how it was a revolution which the gender historians try to assert that women played a major role in this particular revolution. Now, from this slide onwards, I'm trying to speak about those intellectuals who provided the intellectual backup for this revolution. Okay, this revolution is considered to be a success because of the role played by a lot of thinkers and scholars. Okay, so let me see who they are. Okay, now generally you can see that there was a category known as philosophers, like how it's same as philosophers that we use in general terms. Okay, in common parlance, I mean. But here, the philosophers, as I can say, was a term which was used in France, and that was associated with the Enlightenment movement of the 18th century. Philosophers in France were thinkers who associated, reason for the study of any branch of knowledge. They tried to analyze things on the basis of reason. They tried to be rational, whatever the issues was. So they had a critical eye towards things, and you could see that they in fact promoted a kind of understanding. They wanted to create a setup where the intellectuals could freely exchange their ideas, and philosophers predominantly were men. You could see they were most of them were very much, or rather they attacked vehemently the concept of organized religions. So that's about the philosophers. Generally the philosophers, that's the term that we use in English. In France, in French, they were known as philosophers. Now, the aristocrats in France, they blamed the philosophers for, in fact, hatching the revolution. The aristocrats said that philosophers, in fact, hatched a revolution. They were the small minority who were influenced by the destructive ideas of enlightenment. So aristocrats in France and Europe did not like this particular class of people. Now you could see that they in the slide you can see how some of them in fact lived before the revolution happened. They did not directly influence the revolution, but their ideas were there which profoundly influence the people of that period. So they created, you can see that they created an intellectual revolution in France. So let me talk about this person. You must have definitely studied about him in school, that is Francois-Marie Voltaire. Okay, so he was a prominent philosopher of that period. He was a prolific writer. You can see how he questioned or he opposed the church vehemently, and also the nobility. He spoke for religious toleration and also the freedom of expression and thought. Now, he believed in the people's right to revolt. So, he was a philosopher who wrote a lot during this period. Okay, now I have given a few of his works here about the age of Louis XVI, history of Russian Empire, annals of the empire, etc. Now, the second person, Montesquieu. Okay, Montesquieu, in fact, was another scholar who rejected the divine right theory. We've discussed all that, and he supported constitutional monarchy. A very important concept of Montesquieu was how he spoke about the separation of powers. He did not want power to be in the hands of any particular group, but rather the power to be in different hands, so that overlapping was not there. So that is his main contribution, the idea, the notion of separation of powers. Now this person, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, was yet another very important philosopher of that period. His book was The Social Contract, and which can be called as a Bible of French Revolution, in which he largely spoke about people's sovereignty, that is rule, or what to say, supremacy of the people. And he said government was simply an agent. People had all the rights to revolt against a ruler whom they did not like, and he largely spoke about the political equality of citizens. So you can see this person also writing about social contract. We earlier studied about Locke, John Locke, who had who had written about a milder version of what to say, milder version of social contract. Here, this was much more radical. Rousseau was much more radical. He did not say that. He openly said that people could in fact resort to violence if they did not like a ruler and remove him from power. Locke's was a milder version of social contract. Another person, Denis Diderot. So this person compiled an encyclopedia along with Alambert, another friend of him, and he was very skeptical about miracles which could be seen, read in Bible, and this was his idea, which was attacked by religious as well as government authorities, like how he questioned by biblical miracles in the Bible. So his work was banned by the Catholic Church and later by the French government too, his encyclopedia, Diderot. Okay, so a few important names, philosophers we discussed. Now, yet another group was there who were known as the physiocrats in France. Now, physiocrats, you can see again, existed in France in the 18th century. They were another group of scholars who could be seen as result of whose ideas could be seen as a result of the Enlightenment which happened in France. And now these were economists, mainly economists who spoke about spoke about the equality of farmers, who spoke about how farmers had to get justice because they believed that agriculture was the most important occupation, and so they supported farmers. And you could see how they wanted agricultural products to be highly priced so that farmers got justice, farmers got enough profit. So you have a lot of names here, Quesnay, then Mirabeau, Turgot, all those who played a very important role in the revolution which happened later. The physiocrats in France, Turgot and Mirabeau, these names I'll be using later. We'll be talking about these people later. So that is about the intellectual backup about the French Revolution, philosophers, physiocrats, etc. Now, generally, in these slides from now onwards, I'm going to I'm going to give you a picture about the nature of the regime that was there in France before 1789. What kind of a rule, what kind of a governance could be seen? So it was a rule by the Bourbons, a biscuit by the name Bourbon. So it was a rule by the Bourbons who created a lot of mayhem and confusion. They were not efficient rulers, but at the same time, they were rulers who believed in the divine right notion. So a lot of financial mismanagement happened. And at the same time, you can see how these nobles as well as the higher clergy also had a lot of privileges along with the ruler. On the other hand, there were a lot of common people, peasants and farmers who did not have anything. Okay, they were the unprivileged people, the bourgeois. I mean, here when I say bourgeois, you can see those middle class traders, professionals like teachers and lawyers, the workers and peasants, okay, who wanted to rise up the ladder, but unfortunately they couldn't because they were not of the nobility or the higher clergy. When I say clergy, I'm here speaking about the higher clergy, not the lower clergy. Okay, now here this again name of a king which you must have definitely, about whom you must have definitely studied in school, it is Louis XIV, who said that I am the state, after me deluge. He was such an autocrat who believed that he was the ultimate ruler, and he supported the divine right theory. Now he was a grandfather of Louis XVI, who was a ruler in 1789 when the revolution happened. Okay, so these were all Bourbon rulers. Okay, Bourbon rulers. Now Louis XVI, we're going to discuss about his rule because it was during his period that the revolution happened. He was a stubborn and unpredictable ruler, and he reigned from 1774 to 1792. You could see how he got guillotined or beheaded at the end of the revolution. Now he married Marie Antoinette, another biscuit's name, Marie Antoinette, prominent woman, but at the same time she was a lover of extravaganza, Marie Antoinette. So she in fact dragged her husband in all in a lot of controversies, Marie Antoinette. So you have the image of Louis XVI here in the slide, and also here Marie Antoinette with her children. So it was Marie Antoinette who was mainly responsible to make the ruler so hated by his people. So let us see how this French society in those days were divided. You can see how it was divided into estates. Estate is a class. So the first estate here consists mainly of the clergy, the upper clergy. The lower clergy was also there, but the lower clergy, of course, could not reap any benefits. I'm speaking about the upper clergy predominantly. And the second estate consisted of the nobles. They were the nobles of the sword and the nobles of the robe. Okay, so again, these people were very powerful nobles, nobility. Now the third estate, more than 90% of the people, they belong to the third estate. And you can see how these people, the farmers, the peasants, they who consisted the third estate did not possess land at all. And there was a condition in France before 1789 that severe famines were there, inflation was there, and there was a shortage of commodities. So famines increased, and people were forced to were forced to give up all their occupation that was associated with agriculture. They migrated to cities in search of jobs, and they became brigands. Okay, so that is about the third estate. Now, the third estate had to bear the brunt of such bad, inefficient rulers, and also they had to bear the responsibility of paying heavy taxes fell on their shoulders. The upper classes, that is the first and second estates, were exempted from all taxation. The third estate had to pay all the taxes. There was also a tax which was largely resented by the people, that was gabelle, the obligatory purchase of salt from the government agents, that too at a very high price. They had to buy salt from the government agents, not for a low price, but for a very high price. Okay, so that was how in France also, like in India, like we know the salt satyagraha, here also in France, how a movement, how you could see how there was a protest against gabelle, which was an obligatory purchase of salt from government officials. Now, I have given two pictures here which very well will help you understand how the common people, the farmers and peasants, were exploited by the upper classes. You can see a fat noble and also yet another well-built clergy sitting on the shoulder of a poor peasant. Now he was in fact, you can see how he was exploited. This picture, if you in fact have this picture in your mind, you definitely don't have to know much about anything else about the society, because this is self-explanatory. Now this is yet another picture. We can see the clergy and also the nobles. Okay, and you can see how a peasant is lying on the floor and a stone is on top of it and on his chest, and then these people are standing on that. So this is how the common people, the peasants and farmers, were exploited by the nobles and the clergy. So these two images will in fact give you an idea of how the society of France was divided before 1789. Okay, thank you. In the next class, we'll be discussing about the cause of the revolution and also the impacts.